Jaya Radha Radha Jaya Radha Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayo Vishnupada Brahmam Sattvaprajagacharya Srimad Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Mahashri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Shiva Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Guru Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Sari Gaura Bhakti Ki Jai. Anatikoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan Yagya Ki Jai, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Nitai Gauratananda. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Today we are reading from the 4th canto, 29th chapter, verse 38. Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Syadachyuta Katashraya
Syadachuta Katashraya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Nityada Syad Adhiyata
Nityada Saradhiyata
Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Syadachyuta Katashraya
Sadachuta Katashraya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Nityada Syadhiyata
Nityada Saradhiyata
Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Syadachyuta Katashraya
Sadachuta Katashraya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Nityada Syadhiyata.
Nityada Saradhiyata
Would you like to repeat, Kalasri?
Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Sochiradeva Rajarshe
Sadachuta Katashraya
Syadachyuta Katashraya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Shrinvata Shradhanasya
Nityada Saradhiyata
Nityada Syadhiyata. Word for word, sa, that, achirat, very soon, eva, certainly, Raja Rishe, O best of kings, Syat, becomes, Achyuta, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kata, narrations, Ashraya, depending on, Shrinvataha, of one who is hearing, Shradhanasya, faithful, Nityada, always, Syat, becomes, Adhiyataha, by cultivation. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. O best of kings, one who is faithful, who is always hearing the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is always engaged in the culture of Krishna consciousness and in hearing of the Lord's activities, very soon becomes eligible to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. Purport. Constant engagement in the transcendental loving service of Vasudeva means constantly hearing the glories of the Lord. The principles of Bhakti Yoga, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Tasyam, Sakyam, Atma, Nivedanam, are the only means by which perfection can be attained. Simply by hearing of the glories of the Lord, one is elevated to the transcendental position. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Welcome everyone. So this verse is very nice. It gets to the essence of bhakti, the essence of the practice of which we are to follow. And the purport is also very concise. Prabhupada gets to the point that there's 9 processes of bhakti yoga, and by following them, one can achieve perfection by becoming a close associate of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And there's 2 points in the verse that I'd like to focus on. One is faith, and the other is hearing. So all 9 processes of devotional service, as mentioned in the purport, are in themselves enough for achieving perfection. Any one of them can be used to achieve perfection. The prominent example that I can remember is Prahlad Maharaj. He remembered the Lord in perfection, despite all the torture that he had to undergo by his father. He remembered Krishna, and then in time, Krishna appeared and saved him from Hiranyakashipu. So any one of the processes in of themselves is enough. There's other examples like Ambarish Maharaj, I believe. Prayers?
Ambarish is
all 9. So yeah, there's examples in the Bhagavatam of saints executing these processes and achieving perfection. But the problem for us is that we're in Kali Yuga and we don't do anything perfectly. We're so chock full of faults that we can't do any one of these perfectly. And so it's advised that we engage in all of them if possible. And so we try to do that. But there's great stress on the first 2, Shravanam, Kirtanam, hearing and chanting. And they allow us, especially in this Kali Yuga, to achieve perfection as propagated by Lord Chaitanya, who is Krishna himself. And so we may question how hearing can fix everything. How can, simply by hearing, can we achieve perfection? How can I fix the miseries of my material life? Or technically, they can't all be fixed as you might suspect, but we can transcend the troubles that they give us. And we could wonder, how is it possible simply by hearing a name, a mantra, that we could achieve that? But in fact, it's true. The 5th offense to chanting the holy name is to imagine that the glories of the holy name are fictional, that it's an exaggeration. But it's not, it's the truth. And as we engage in the process, gradually we learn it. And depending on our intensity, our greed to have it, depending on that, some will go faster, some will go slower. But ultimately, if we stay on the path, this goal will be achieved and the realization will come that the holy name in of itself is enough to save us from the onslaughts of material nature and give us uninterrupted bliss and uninterrupted love. So we have some trouble having faith that simply by hearing this can be achieved. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that if we understand the offenses to the holy name and actively endeavor not to commit those offenses, the 10 offenses to the holy name, if we make an endeavor to thoroughly understand them and actively make it an effort not to commit them, this is enough to progress through Namabhas. So if we want to chant purely more quickly, we are encouraged to learn in depth about these 10 offenses and then try not to commit them. So it's inevitable that we will commit them. A lot of them are unconscious. We don't realize we're doing it. And even when we're conscious of that we're doing it, it's very difficult to stop. At least, offenses occur physically, verbally, and mentally. The physically being the gross, verbal being less gross, more subtle, and then mental being most subtle. And our minds are making offenses all the time. But if we're conscious of those offenses and we sincerely repent them, that in of itself is enough to eradicate the offense until eventually they stop altogether. So we can chant in Namabhas and gradually progress by making an effort not to commit these offenses. And then the clouds of anarthas and the mist and fog of ignorance gradually dissipate as the sun of Krishna arises in our heart when we chant and when we hear the holy name. So this emergence of the Krishna sun and the dissipation of the clouds and the fog, when it becomes more prominent, inevitably Krishna will appear more in his holy name, and this will in turn purify us more. It's reciprocal. And then more rapidly I can progress through Namavas and eventually reach Shuddhanam, the pure name. And once we reach the pure name, when we actually experience Krishna full in his name, then we will have no doubt about any of these statements in the Shastra, any of these statements by Srila Prabhupada, that Krishna is in his holy name, and it is the Sarvatma Prabhu can the panacea, I believe, of, so the holy name is the panacea, the cure-all, the magic fix, so to speak, the medicine to cure all our ills and give us love and give us bliss that we are so much hankering for. So next I'll discuss a little bit about faith. So to get through this process and to make that advancement, we need some faith in the beginning. Lord Chaitanya and Prabhu Nityananda are so extremely merciful that they give us a little bit of a taste in the beginning. Some of us may have mystical experiences in the very beginning, and then they might fade over time. And this is Lord Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda's mercy. Here's a little taste, here's what's the potential. And then you follow the process, then you'll get more. So some faith is required in the beginning, and then it has to be built upon. It has to be intensified. So I'll quote a verse in the, this is in a purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I can't remember where. Prabhupada is saying Shraddha, this word, which is also a word in the verse today. Shraddha is, Prabhupada explains it as confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. Oh, excuse me, that was the actual verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, firm faith and confidence are called Shraddha. So this is what we want. We want faith in Krishna and firm faith in the process to achieve Krishna. But this is a gradual process, and this faith is unlike anything that you might have experienced before. This word faith is tossed around in mundane society. But in Krishna consciousness, it is very, very profound. It's a practical experience, a revelation within the heart. So faith in Krishna is trust that he, Krishna, will take care of you, despite all of your flaws and contaminations. Simply by endeavoring to please Krishna, he personally will take care of you. So this faith in Krishna consciousness is not a hat that we wear on our head, or a patch that we sew onto our jacket, or a pin that we put on our lapel before we give a speech. Not superficial at all. I'm not trying to judge other religions or other people of faith, but I see this a lot in Christians and others that, yeah, I'm a Christian, and they say just like, yeah, I'm an American, or I have a male body. It's just a label, and that's it. There's nothing else to it. But in Krishna consciousness, faith is way, way more than that. It's a practical realization and experience that as we engage in the process, as it's prescribed, Krishna will gradually reveal himself and say, hey, I am real, I am a person, and I care about you, and I'm trying to have a loving relationship with you, and this is what we both need and what we both want. So let's work on that. As this happens, it's not easy, because the false ego will put up a huge fight, and so will the mind. And Krishna will put us in the situations where you have to choose. Hold on to your material attachments or let go of them and trust that Krishna will reciprocate. And many of us have fears of position in society, money, all these things, which are very real and they're legitimate. This world is a very terrifying place to exist in as an eternal living entity. And we're terrified of the consequences. If I let go of everything, then what will I do? Like, I have to take care of myself. But the fact is that Krishna has actually taken care of us. And as we progress in our faith, we can let go of control. We can let go of trying to be the controller and the enjoyer. And gradually, Krishna will prove that he will take care. But that's hard to do. How do you, practically speaking, how do you trust somebody that you can't speak with, that you can't stand in front of and talk to them and have them talk back to you and have a relationship as we understand it materially? Yeah, how do you trust somebody like that without having to be able to do that? Now it's a fact that we see Krishna in his deity form, in his holy name. The devotees also speak his words to us. That is a fact, but we're not used to that. All we understand is a body, and a person is in a body, and we interact with them. And by those actions, that's how we build trust. So how do you build trust in someone that you can't see, that you can't interact with, that you can't talk with directly? That is a challenge. But as time goes on, this becomes more and more real. In Atlanta, Prabhupada was giving a lecture and he went into ecstatic emotions. And if I understand correctly, he said, how do you love someone that you can't interact with? Like I said, to paraphrase. And he said, Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda are so merciful. They are giving us the ability to revive our love for Krishna, even though we don't have the intelligence, we don't really necessarily have the ability and the faith to come so close to Krishna directly. We need that mercy. So I'll read a verse in the 11th canto about faith. It's interesting. I find myself quoting this verse very often when I give classes. Inadvertently, I don't purposely do it, but it keeps coming up. It has to do with faith in Krishna, that he will take care of all of your material needs, all your spiritual needs, and bring you back to Godhead. And along the way, you will reach so many impediments, so many troubles, so many anxieties. But if you stick to the process and you have faith that he will reciprocate, then he proves that he is there and he is doing things to help us. So this is in the 11th canto, 20th chapter, verses 27 and 28. Having awakened faith in the narrations of my glories, being disgusted with all material activities, knowing that all sense gratification leads to misery, but still being unable to renounce all sense enjoyment, my devotee should remain happy and worship me with great faith and conviction. Even though he is sometimes engaged in sense enjoyment, my devotee knows that all sense gratification leads to a miserable result, and he sincerely repents such activities. So we might have the most sincere desire to become a pure devotee, to become a close associate of Krishna, but we have that might be in the core of our heart, and then around the core there might be all these material desires. And as we engage in the process, they come up and they might disturb us greatly. But Krishna says, please don't be disturbed by them. In due time, they will dissipate. They will disappear. Just have faith that the process works and I am here and you can achieve me. That love is there and will be revived. Just stick to the process, be dutiful, and engage in the process. And in time, you will see. So the purport is very nice too. I'll read part of it. The beginning stage of pure devotional service is described here by the Lord. A sincere devotee has practically seen that all material activities lead only to sense gratification, and all sense gratification leads to misery. So we might have this practical realization in bhakti, but still the desires are there. You know, I know the fire is hot, but I keep touching it. I keep getting burned. But if we have faith, we can push on and we can transcend. So, continuing the purport. Thus, a devotee's sincere desire to engage. Excuse me, one second. Thus, a devotee's sincere desire to engage 24 hours a day in the loving service of the Lord without any personal motivation. The devotee sincerely desires to be established in his constitutional position as the Lord's eternal servitor, and he prays to the Lord to elevate him to this exalted position. The word anishvara indicates that because of one's past sinful activities and bad habits, one may not immediately be able to completely extinguish the enjoying spirit. The Lord here encourages such a devotee not to be overly depressed or morose, but to remain enthusiastic and to go on with his loving service. The word nirvana indicates that a sincere devotee, although somewhat entangled in the remnants of sense gratification, is completely disgusted with material life and under no circumstances willingly commits to sinful activities. In fact, he avoids every kind of materialistic activity. The word kaman basically refers to sex attraction and its byproducts in the form of children, home, and so forth. Within the material world, the sex impulse is so strong that even a sincere candidate in the loving service of the Lord may sometimes be disturbed by sex attraction or by lingering sentiments for wife and children. A pure devotee certainly feels spiritual affection for all living entities, including the so-called wife and children, but he knows that material bodily attraction leads to no good, for it simply entangles one and one's so-called relatives in a miserable chain reaction of fruitive activities. The words dritha nishchaya, steadfast conviction, indicates that in any circumstance, a devotee is completely determined to go on with his prescribed duties for Krishna. Thus, he thinks, by my previous shameful life, my heart is polluted with many illusory attachments. Personally, I have no power to stop them. Only Lord Krishna within my heart can remove such inauspicious contamination. But whether the Lord removes such attachments immediately or lets me go on being afflicted by them, I will never give up my devotional service to him. Even if the Lord places millions of obstacles on my path, and even if because of my offenses I go to hell, I never for a moment stop serving Lord Krishna. I am not interested in mental speculation and fruitive activities. Even if Lord Brahma personally comes before me offering such engagements, I will not be even slightly interested. Although I am attached to material things, I can see very clearly that they lead to no good because they simply give me trouble and disturb my devotional service to the Lord. Therefore, I sincerely repent my foolish attachments to so many material things, and I am patiently awaiting Lord Krishna's mercy. So we might have practical realization that all these material desires that we have bring misery, and that's a fact. But still, the desires are still there. I'm sure some of the desires have dissipated over time for all of us, but some of them still remain. And so the trick Krishna is saying here is don't become morose that they are still there. In due time, I will remove them. But in the meantime, go on with your service. Go on with your duties. And in time, I will show you. So this faith is super important. And like I said, it is not something mundane. It is a practical experience. And deepening that faith sometimes is a very externally painful experience. The false ego in the mind will put up a hell of a fight and may make you cry, may make you angry and sad and all these things. But in due time, that will dissipate. And the faith will increase. So the other point that I mentioned in the beginning is about hearing. Hearing is what will bring us this perfection and deepen our faith. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport that we should constantly be hearing. This will increase our faith naturally. And besides that, we can attain love of God by this process in of itself. It's the means and the end. And it is the panacea, the cure for material consciousness, which is a disease. If you imagine the spirit soul as a normal, healthy body, material consciousness is the disease that disturbs it. And so this disease needs to be cured. And believe it or not, the hearing is the process to do it. In the 11th canto, 14th chapter, verse 26, says, when a diseased eye is treated with medicinal ointment, it gradually recovers its power to see. Similarly, as a conscious living entity cleanses himself of material contamination by hearing and chanting the pious narrations of my glories, he regains his ability to see me, the absolute truth, in my subtle spiritual form. So the name, the pastimes, this is this medicine. And practically speaking, we should hear it 24/7. And in time, we'll see the result. In the purport, it says, the Lord is called Shukshman because he is pure spiritual consciousness, without any tinge of material energy. If one chants and hears the holy name and glories of Krishna with great sincerity, there is immediately a transcendental effect. We can immediately see the spiritual world and pastimes of the Lord if we fully surrender to the process mentioned here. A blind person feels perpetual gratitude to a doctor who restores his sight. Similarly, we sing Chakshu Dan Janme Janme Prabhuse. The bona fide spiritual master, the representative of Lord Krishna, restores our spiritual sight, and thus he is our eternal Lord and Master. So when we start practicing, we are committing many offenses, and as I mentioned in the beginning, gradually we can chant purely. And when we chant purely, then we will see that Krishna is his name and vice versa. And that we will experience intense love and pure bliss. I was going to say something and I forgot. I don't remember. So, oh boy. I had another verse that I wanted to quote, but give me 1 second. I was reading this yesterday. Prayers of the Personified Vedas. 10, chapter 87. Verse 16. Yeah. This is one of the Vedas personified, waking Lord Narayan from his slumber to recreate the material cosmos. They say, therefore, O master of the three worlds, the wise get rid of all misery by diving deep into the nectarian ocean of topics about you, which washes away all the contamination of the universe. Then what to speak of those who, having by spiritual strength rid their minds of bad habits and freed themselves from time, are able to worship your true nature, O Supreme One, finding within it uninterrupted bliss. In other words, Krishna's name and his nectarian topics are so pure, they're basically the definition of pure, that when we engage in them, it washes away the contamination of the universe, which is implied, your false ego, your mind, your material intelligence, your gross body, all that gets washed away, and you as a spirit soul transcend. And then if it's that powerful and if it's that wonderful, then what to speak of those who have already been purified? Imagine the bliss and the love that one experiences by attaining that. Yeah, I just remembered the point that I wanted to mention. Someone might ask, well, I've been chanting for so many years, I've been practicing for so many years, and I'm not experiencing these things. And I try to not commit the offenses of the holy name, but still, I don't see the result. And a practical thing to say about that is that, well, I guess another part of the argument too is that I heard that chanting purely is based solely on the mercy of Guru and Krishna. Yes, that is true. And yes, we may practice for a long time and not experience these things. But that mercy is dependent on our efforts. The amount of mercy that we get to chant purely is based on the amount of effort that we put out to chant purely. So if we make a sincere effort, and not just, maybe once a day I'll do it, or excuse me, once, maybe I'll do it now and then I'll forget later. No, if you constantly make that endeavor, that mercy will come. So it's not so much it's not a lost cause. One actually has to put out the effort, and then the mercy will come. I'll just read two parts of the purport to the verse that I just read about the personified Vedas, the one in there. Because all the Vedas declare the supremacy of the Supreme Person of Godhead as the cause of all causes, discriminating persons should take to his worship. By diving into the ocean of his glories, intelligent devotees help dispel the distress of all souls and loosen their own burning attachment to materialistic life. These advancing devotees gradually give up all material attachment and lose any interest they once had in the troublesome austerities of karma, jnana, and yoga. Beyond these devotees are the suris, connoisseurs of spiritual truth, who honor the nectarian ocean of the Supreme Lord's glories by immersing themselves fully within it. These mature devotees of the Supreme Lord achieve unimaginable perfection. The Lord, reciprocating their sincere endeavors, empower them to realize Him in His personal form. Remembering with rapture the Lord's intimate pastimes and entourage, they are automatically freed from the last subtle traces of mental contamination and from sensitivity to the unavoidable pains of disease and old age. So, to summarize, hearing and chanting will bring us perfection, and the hearing and chanting in of itself brings us the result. It is the result, actually. So this hearing and chanting is extremely important in combination with all the other processes, 7 processes, that if we can engage in them. And faith is super important. It's dynamic. It's a heartfelt experience. If anybody has any comments, questions, corrections, please share. Goes through.
I was just thinking that, the points you were making about offenses. I was thinking, offenses can really have, an effect. I've seen it in, my own Krishna consciousness and in others as well. That, if you're committing offenses, particularly offenses against devotees, there's, you might think you get away with it in the short term, but in the long term, it always comes back to bite you. We never actually get away with anything.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the offenses of the devotees is very serious. It will affect our chanting. It will affect our service. Yeah, Krishna wants to perfect us, so we have to expect to be chastised, right? But we that requires conscientious effort on our part. The instructions are not always going to be so gross. As we advance, they become more and more subtle, so we have to listen closely. Buddha Bhavana was saying when he was here, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, Krishna will speak to us through these methods on how to remedy mistakes. Thank you for sharing it. Does anybody online have any comments, questions, corrections? So here's the messages in the chat. Thank you, Yashadi, for sharing. I have not spent the adequate time to memorize verses. I only memorized maybe 3 verses in my career thus far. Thank you for Shabda Shabde Vishvakashe Kahi Shridrita Nishchaya Krishna Bhakti Kaya Sarva Karma Kriptahaya. Shraddha is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental, loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. Thank you. Okay, if there's nothing here, we will set up the view of Radha Damodar. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Chakshudam.